Right. So how do you deal with the relationship between, right, debts between people within a household or where there's a community of property and between you and outsiders? It's an interesting question because, in fact, it's a perfect example of what I was talking about, how we try to frame everything in terms of exchange. There's some need to do so, even things that don't work that way at all. And the other point that I was making about how we try to frame things morally in terms of debt. Because you'll often find people saying, well, this is how we repay our parents for the pains of childbirth and what they do. But in almost every case, it's a metaphor. It has nothing to do with how people actually relate to each other. So often when you see how people are actually interacting, it's on a principle, has nothing to do with debt. You're not calculating equivalence at all. But then when you want to think about it in a bigger picture, suddenly you're trying to figure out some way to say it's all about debts. I actually use a story about this famous Canadian naturalist whose father presented him with a bill for everything he owed him up to the age of 21. He said, okay, here's how much it cost to pay the doctor to deliver you. Here's your primary education. He had it all worked out. And he said, and he gave him the bill, and the guy paid it and said, fine, to hell with you, I'm never going to speak to you again, and walked off. But that's what it basically means, because when you're paying a debt, it implies we need have no further relations. So the idea of actually paying a debt between people that you love is utterly insulting. You'd only do it if you really want to have nothing further to do with each other. But nonetheless, people like to frame it in those terms. One of the most fascinating concepts I discovered when researching this was the notion of the milk debt. This is a medieval Chinese Buddhist concept. What they did was they calculated what they thought was the exact number of pecks of milk you absorbed from your mother in the first years of your life. And that's a fundamental debt you owe to your mother. And said, okay, you owe exactly 37 pecks of milk. But then they would say, all right, to pay back even like 1 day's worth of milk would in fact take 400,000 years of feeding her off your own personal flesh. I mean, so it was a way of saying, like, you could not conceivably pay this debt. So why are they calculating as a debt at all? It's again that same tension of you want to frame debt as morality, and they say they're the same thing, but as soon as you do, you say, except not really. It's completely ridiculous, isn't it? So that tension, like the need to pretend that it's a debt, but then once you say it, to say, actually, no, it's not a debt at all. It's absurd to even think of a debt. Why are we saying this? Recurs over and over and over again. And it's because commerce gives us this idea that we want to frame everything in commercial terms, that we really ought to, that we start doing that, and then we say, no, actually, we can't.